All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is John Lee, your local real estate agent here in the greater Philadelphia and Philadelphia area. And we have a special guest, also another real estate agent, Matt Tallent. So, Matt, before we begin, I always ask everyone, tell me about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, man. I'm glad I could be on. This is awesome. So yeah, kind of about like myself and what I do. I'm a husband, a realtor, in the local Philadelphia area, and I'm also a real estate investor. So I invest in like long-term rentals in an A-class Philadelphia market, and I just got my first like Airbnb down the shore. So I'll be working on that. I'm closing like next week. So getting everything together for that.
Mm, yeah, so that's good. So kind of segueing from what you are doing now as a real estate investor and also a realtor with Keller Williams. And by the way, we're two different brokerages, so that's pretty
Yeah,
cool, right?
yeah.
I think I think some realtors have certain opinions about working with other agents from different brokers, but in my personal opinion, I don't care. Obviously, you don't care. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I always say the broker is more for the agent and the agent is for the client. So
Right.
like wherever like agents feel comfortable and they're getting the best, help and deal for them. Like I'll work with anyone and I try to help everyone, whether it's, someone from another office or another brokerage. Like I don't really care because
Mhm.
in the end, like we'll all help each other out and grow from each other.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's awesome. So to segue into the next question, tell me how you grew up from your child to now. So I always ask, what is your story, right? So if you can explain to our audience what your story is.
Yeah, yeah, man. So it was tough. I came from a pretty broken family. Like I have two really great parents, but kind of my family was surrounded by a lot of issues, drug abuse, mental health issues, which I think a lot of families go through today, especially like if you see what's going on in the news. So I had a ton of good times in my childhood too. I did everything that, kids do and I had a great time, but on the flip side, I was constantly dealing with issues behind the scenes. At one point, like two of my parents both got cancer, my dad and my stepmom. So that was like a lot to deal with. So it just constantly felt like when I was growing up, like how much can one person handle? And I just felt like I constantly was getting like berated with different issues. And once one issue would end, another one would come up. And it was just like, almost a bad joke. But it gave me the background, kind of left me with the background, like feeling like I was a victim mentality. It really affected me in the other areas of my life. And I didn't really feel like I could succeed because I just felt like my life was predetermined to fail. So that's kind of where I started from.
Mhm.
And I believe to like, I kind of began to believe whatever I started out doing, I couldn't succeed because of like where I came from. But I had two really great mentors, my mom and my dad, and I lived with my mom who constantly pushed me to be positive, hardworking, show up on time, the basic things that build success, and do what like you say you're going to do. So I really look at like the foundation of any success as you have to have a good mindset and you have to be healthy. That's the foundation of building like a good business. And I had the opposite of that because of, kind of where I started out in life. So I look at like the first 24 years of my life as building a positive mindset, and that would create the foundation of my business. So whenever you're starting out, you need a good mindset. You can't build a business when you're not healthy and have a bad mindset. So those first 24 years of life were like key to building, as they call like mental toughness, which is like now the foundation of my business.
So what are some examples that you can give, or if you don't want to share, that's okay, but if you were open to sharing on
Yeah.
some of the challenges that you dealt with from, you know, from your life.
Yeah. I mean, I think you know, um, just like kind of the isolation you feel because you look at other families growing up, like you think everyone has a two-parent household, which a lot of people don't have today. And then, dealing with issues at home, like mental health issues that, you're surrounded by with other family members, or whether it's, drug issues, that other family members are dealing with, like that starts to rub off on you and you start to become crazy because
Yeah.
you're surrounded by like as they say, like the five people you're surrounded by is who you become. So if you're dealing with like people who are really like affected by certain issues, it starts to
Mhm.
rub off on you and you just feel isolated because you want to help these people and you can't really control certain aspects of life. So I learned a lot in life to like control what I can control. And, if you've ever dealt with people with drug addictions or anything, you think you can fix them and you quickly learn that you can't. And so you learn very much in life, like control what you can control and, you have to let go of the things you can't control.
No, that's an awesome perspective. It's crazy because every time I interview with someone, everyone has a different story, and it's so interesting to hear everyone's different perspective. In some small way, I can kind of relate in a sense with my parents. I love them to death, and everything that they did for me was always about security, like financial reasons, right? So
Yeah.
they were always around to put food on the table, but as far as being there for a baseball game or, a concert or any of those things, I think a lot of people in my culture can relate with that because a lot of Koreans, I'm a second generation Korean, but a lot of first and second generation Koreans were, business owners. So they're just being so consumed with work. So there
Yeah.
is a part of life where you think like, oh man, like you think that life works this way and it's just a common way of thinking, but you don't know that there's a pattern, right? That people are
Yeah.
just living this pattern. So I
Yeah.
can, I,
And when you're growing up, it's like very isolating because you think you're the only one going through something. And then
right,
as you get older, you talk to other people and you learn like, oh, everyone has their own issues they're dealing with. Like most people have issues that they're dealing with, but you think it's only you when you're growing up. So
of course, and that's important to share, especially with everyone, especially for someone like me who, didn't like I didn't grow up the same way as you, so that's actually a pretty good perspective on that.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, your transition, right? Obviously from where you were as, an adolescent teenager to, becoming a young adult, how did you get into being a realtor?
Yeah. So like kind of like when I was like 10 years old, like the entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
So I like remember I went to my mom and I asked her for something and she's like, it was like a video game or something like that. And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I want to buy this thing. And she's like, well, you need to get a job. And I was like, I'm 10 years old. And she had a boss who needed landscaping help. So I would go over his house and landscape, and my mom would come with me and like make some extra money on the side landscaping. So we would do that on like weekends. And then I like once I was like 10 years old, I always had a job. Um, at eighth grade, I started working at McDonald's and then basically had like a million different jobs. But that was kind of like what started my entrepreneurial mindset. And I learned how to work at an early age. And I started learning like I said, like I felt like I was never successful. And then through working, I found that my hard work paid off. And I was like, oh, if I actually work hard, I can actually get ahead, which
Mhm.
seems simple, but I didn't understand that because of where I came from. So um, once I like kind of learned that like I had that good mindset, it was like fuel to the fire. I graduated from college at 23 with a degree in environmental science, and there weren't really any jobs in that. So went to corporate America, and I got a W-2 job so I could get loans to buy houses. And so I went to work for Vanguard, and then I bought my first property at like 24. And that was like the classic like house hack, FHA. I put 3.5% down, got a seller's assist, and rented it out to my three roommates. So I lived in one room, I rented three out. And then, 8 months after that, I was dating my girlfriend, now wife at the time, and she wanted to get our own house together. So I moved into the second house and did like 5% down with a seller's assist. So it was like low money out of pocket again.
Right.
And
Right.
and then just kept like doing that, moving again into like my third property. And that was like another 5% down with a seller's assist. So we were always low money out of pocket. And all the time in the background, I'm working at corporate America. I switched from Vanguard to another company. And it was like we would go in at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was supposed to be out by 3 p.m. But we stayed till 5 p.m. every day because we were short staffed. We didn't have enough employees.
Mhm.
There was too much work like given to our team. So we were doing the work like three teams. So I ended up working like 60 hours a week plus my commute, and I hated it. And I was in like a financial analytical role, which I'm not like that person, which I learned. I'm more like a sales, like outgoing. I like talking to people. I
Right.
hate like sitting behind a computer and just analyzing stuff. Um, so I really didn't like my job, and I got my license on the side because I was like, I'll make extra money so I can buy more investment properties and eventually get out of this job. And I met with my team leader for real estate once a week. And as the year progressed in 2019, I was like, dude, I hate my job so much. Like, it's miserable. Um, Things were not good, and like, it wasn't a happy team environment. So, it was kind of like you do 60-hour weeks and then you get yelled at for not doing enough work. That was kind of the environment. And I just felt like I didn't have any control over my life. Like, even if I wanted to go to the dentist, I had to ask for permission to take off early. Like, it was crazy. Um, yeah, it was rough.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so I remember like I came back from lunch one day, I was on my phone, and I came back early from lunch, and my boss was like, "Hey, you're on your phone way too much." Like, she Skyped me from across the aisle, and I was like, "Okay." And that was kind of like why I left my job. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I transitioned in February of 2020 into being a full-time realtor. So I was already doing the networking that came with real estate because of investing. So I was going to real estate investing meetings. And so in February 2020, I went to full time to real estate, being a realtor. And then basically, like, the world shut down in March of 2020. So I was working from home from that point. But that's how the long winded answer of how I got into being a realtor.
Yeah. So, I mean, most people don't know exactly how you transition from, being a part-time realtor. Not that being part-time is a bad or good thing, but just the commitment that you decided, right, to actually go and really make it work for yourself. Like, what was your aha moment?
I knew that I was already doing the networking that like was necessary, and there was just a few opportunities that I was like, if I could be in this full time, I know I'd be able to do more with it.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just like if I could do it full time, I really think I could like at least replace my current income.
Hmm. And I mean, what I was trying to get to for our audience and just for our audience to know you a little bit better was, from your story, from what, at least from what you told me, you started a lot with renting, right? You did a lot of leases, and I think you still do leases, but you were strictly just doing leases, right?
Yeah. So when I
Okay.
started, I was with the Howe Group in Philadelphia, and they own a lot of apartment buildings. And I was really lucky because like I quit my job, then COVID happened, and so I had like no form of income because you're 100% commission based. So luckily, like I was with the Howe Group, and they needed people to do leasing for them. So it was the thing. Like I did like one building and I was doing pretty good at it. And then they gave me like another building and another building. And like by the time I quit leasing, like I was doing like 120 plus units. Like I didn't lease that many, but I was in charge of like 120 plus units. I probably leased like from February to December, I probably leased like 55 units.
That's still a lot.
Yeah. But I hustled. Like I worked from like 6 a.m. to like 10 at night. Like I'd be
Yeah. Yeah.
in Fishtown at 10 at night or like 9 at night giving tours, getting back at 10.
Yeah.
So it was like a very full-time job. And I like reached my goal or replaced my income, but it wasn't
Right.
that much money. It was like entry level pay.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of hours for not that much money.
Well, that's why I was trying to segue into you saying like, "Hey, man, you're an extremely hard worker, and that's what drew me to you as a person as well." And when we first met, it was when you had the seminar on how you went from was it 1 million to 8 million? Am I right there?
Yeah, so in
Okay.
2020, I did like about 1 million, and then that was just like I got lucky and some sales came my way. And then in 2021, that's when I really went full time. Like I quit leasing, went full time buying and selling, and
Right.
did like 8 million that
Okay.
year.
And what are you projecting for the new year?
I'll be at like 14 million pending and
That's
closed like this
awesome.
year. And then I'm hoping for next year to get to 20 million in sales.
And that's why I was so drawn into you. And the first thing I asked you was obviously how you did it, but one common thing that we both now have is we're getting coaching. We're getting coaching through Tom Ferry, and how serious you were into the business. And this coaching things for our audience. This coaching thing isn't cheap. It's easily
Yeah.
over $10,000 to get this kind of coaching. So, and again, that's how you and I connected, and we still are connecting with each other because obviously you're in the game as a real estate agent as well as an investor. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So to the next question, what is a common, and maybe I can help you answer this too, but what is a common myth about our job as being a realtor?
So my favorite is when I tell people I'm a realtor and they're like, "Oh, so you make your own schedule." And I'm like, "No, like people see like selling sunset and they're like, "Oh, you go into the office at 11, you get lunch at 12, your office gives you a bunch of leads." So that's like I think the big misconception is like I probably work like 70 hours a week still.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I think a lot of people have a misconception about what the job actually entails. Like when you tell people you're a realtor, they're like, oh, you show houses, you get your leads from your office. And most of the job is actually lead generation. If you're
Oh
good at
yeah.
lead generating, that's like your job. And that's how you are successful in this industry. Like most of my job's not selling houses or showing houses, it's lead generation.
I think that's the fun part about the job, if anything, right? Actually going
Yeah.
out and showing houses. Like
Yeah,
it
that's like
that's
the fun part.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, you know what? To add on to that, I do agree with you in the sense that a lot of people do think that we do create our like we have our own schedule, which we kind of do, but I also find that the more successful realtors actually have a blocked schedule.
Yeah.
They are very in tune with their time and they're blocking their schedule out. So I do agree with you in that way. Uh, to the next question. So you did mention to me, Matt, that obviously you had your mom and dad as mentors for you, right? But as far as a professional career, who has been instrumental in that way as a realtor, a professional mentor?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of mentors. Like I've been blessed, and I've always sought out mentors. Since I like got out of college, I sought out like professional mentors. So one of my big ones when I was getting started was Jesse Johnston, who was my team leader at my first real estate group. And he really helped me get started in real estate and being a realtor. Um, and then I just switched teams. So my other big mentor is my coach Todd, who was with Tom Ferry. He's my coach through there. And then I just switched teams, so I joined KW Mainline. So I'm surrounded by people like Mike McCann, who's the number one realtor in Philly, Erica Duchel, and her team, who's killing it on the main line. Jeremy Bowers, who's like very very business savvy. He owns a lot of rental properties and sells a lot of real estate. So I'm just surrounded by a ton of people at this office, which is why I joined it. because I knew if I joined this office, like I'll eventually get to their level of success.
No, I think there's a lot of common things that you're saying here throughout this whole podcast or video, however you want to call it. You always are trying to surround those that are like-minded. In the beginning, you did mention the five people, right? You are technically, you know, characteristically kind of similar to the people who who you're with.
Yeah, and they're all great family people too, which is also why
Hmm.
I joined. Like when I started, like those were my three big reasons was like increasing my sales, be around good family people, and be around people who are growing their net worth at the same time. And they're all doing all three. So those three things were important to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're going to ask you a random question. What's an insult you've received that you're proud of?
So the classic one for me is like you work too much or you work too hard. And I think like throughout my teens and 20s, like I've had like two jobs for most of my 20s, the whole time. So
Yeah.
I've always been working throughout my 20s and but it's definitely paid off. Like I'm very happy with where I'm at. And I've missed like a lot of Netflix shows, but I've been able to do a lot of stuff that I want to do. So I really think like putting in the work in your teens and 20s pays off when you like come to be at your 30s.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. What do you like to do given the free time? If you have any.
Yeah, I mean, if I have free time, I like working out, or I have like biking with like my buddies is fun, or just like I go on trips and stuff too. So, I just came back from like Mexico with a trip with my friends, so that was really fun. So anything like that, just hanging out with friends or like biking, stuff like that.
Okay. And a question for our listeners, and I get this quite often, especially for us to be realtors. This is a very common question now. How do buyers deal with the interest rates?
Yeah, so it depends what situation you're in. So I'm in this boat now. I'm under contract on a house. That's like probably the most expensive property I purchased by far. So I'm dealing with a 6.875% interest rate. But my thing is the market I'm buying in is low inventory. So there's not much that's going to come up there again. And it's something I'm going to own for like the rest of my life. So
You're referring to the Jersey Shore house, right?
yeah,
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Continue.
yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah, if you're buying something and you're going to live in it for 5+ years, I think it makes sense. If it's going to be a home for you and you're a retail buyer, I think most of my retail buyers, like residential buyers, they haven't been deterred at all by the rates. It's mostly investors who are buying investment properties who are like the numbers just don't work for me anymore. So that's where I'm seeing the issue.
Yeah. So one thing that I saw you creatively post on your Facebook, which I should have congratulated you on, was you posted an assumable loan, right? That is an extremely creative way for potential buyers to get in on a loan that's a way lower rate than it is now. Can you explain to our audience how that works?
Yeah, so basically what it was a house in my marketplace that the seller had a 2.5 or 2.75% interest rate. So if the buyer bought the home, they could assume that mortgage and they would have to get financing for the spread of what was owed on the home versus what they're paying for it. So, if you're buying the house for or if they owe, let's say 300,000 on it, they're selling it for 400,000. You'd have to kind of get financing for that spread of the 100,000. But overall, like you're pretty much getting a rate of 2.75% when you buy
Right.
the house.
And for our listeners, that's assuming that the seller is one willing to do that, and also two that the mortgage company allows that to happen. Not every company will allow that to happen. Just for our listeners.
Correct. Yeah. And another big tool for like home buyers is you can do the 2-1 rate buy down.
Hmm.
So what that means is like, let's say rates are at 6% right now. You can do a 2-1 rate buy down where you pay 2% of the sale price to the mortgage company. And so year one, your rate is 4%. year two, your rate is 5%. And then year three, it locks back in at 6%. But the idea is that in 3 years, the rates are going to be much
It's going to
lower.
change.
Yeah, and you can refinance out of that loan. So
Right.
that's something like a lot of my buyers have been doing too.
Right. And if you're good as Matt, he can negotiate that buy down, right? For the seller to
Yep.
pay for
Yes, sir.
it.
Yeah, so we'll get a seller's assist where they
Yeah.
basically pay for the rate buy down. So we've been doing
Okay.
that.
Okay. And also for our listeners, how does seller's assist work? What's the percentages? How does it work?
So it depends on what loan you're doing. So I say to my buyers, like a seller's assist is what you think of when people talk about the seller's paying for your closing costs. So if I was to sell John a house for $100,000 and he was like, "Hey, I need 10,000 in seller's assist for my closing costs," John's going to bring 10,000 less out of pocket to the table, and I'm going to walk away from that sale with $90,000. So it's a negative to me, but it's a positive to the buyer.
Hmm.
And basically, so for FHA buyers, you're allowed up to a 6% seller's assist, 6% of the sale price. If you're putting 5% down, you're allowed a 3% assist. And if you're putting 10% down, you're allowed back to a 6% assist.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And again, guys, if you need to rehear this conversation to write this information down, it's quite important.
Yeah, and you
Uh,
can do it on investment properties too. Like I do, like I'll get a 2% seller's assist on investment properties.
mhm.
So that saves me money out of pocket. So I can keep buying more properties.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. And the for our sellers though, I want to ask for our sellers, right? How can our sellers still capture top dollar in this changing market?
Yeah, so most of the homes I've written offers on
Hmm.
have gone to multiple offers still. So you're seeing in the headlines, they're like, "Oh my God, the housing market's going to crash. It's going to go down 25% and all this craziness." But most of the deals that my buyers have been looking at are still multiple offer situations. And a lot of them like we beat out, but it's still like there's still two or three offers on houses. So that's what I've been seeing. So it's still a competitive marketplace. I think when people talk about the market being down, the number of transactions happening is down, but the demand for homes is still pretty high. Um, so I've seen like buyer demand is down like around 12% in Philadelphia this year from last year,
Hmm.
but it's still really competitive and we still don't really have the inventory of homes. So what I would tell people, if you want to get top dollar for your home, put it on the market, paint it gray, clean it, and stage it. And those homes that are, a decent product that are priced right are getting multiple offers.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So to wrap things up here, what are you looking for to make your job easier? I know a common answer would be like a vacation, right? For you, right? Because you work
Yeah.
so much. But if you could fill a specific role, make a purchase, an acquisition, what is one thing you need help with?
Yeah, so I'm looking like hopefully by the end of quarter one, to hire like my first virtual assistant, and that'll take off the weight of a lot of administrative stuff that I do and like marketing and social media and everything like that. So I'm really like the more I've grown, the more transactions I have under contract, and that's a lot of administrative work. And then you kind of take your eye off the ball of lead generation. So I'm hiring like hopefully by the end of quarter one virtual assistant to help me with those administrative tasks so I can go out and do what I'm good at, which is lead generation, talking and connecting with people.
Matt, this is awesome. So lastly, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so you can go to my Instagram at Call Philly Home, just on Instagram, and you'll find me there.
Okay, cool. I'll make sure I put it in the caption or the title below. And yeah, it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah,
And
you too, man.
yeah,
Thanks for
dude,
having me.
yo, awesome, man. We definitely should link up again.
Definitely.
All right, brother.